Hi, this is Lainey Cameron, and today I'm here with Rebecca Hodge, who is going to talk about WILDLAND that came out in 2020. She and I were 2020 debuts together. And my goodness, this is a book that just keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire way through. So congratulations, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Lainey. It's great to be here and great to actually see you as a real person.
As close as we get these days, right?
Absolutely.
And I loved this book. In fact, I went back to look at what other people said in the reviews, and here's the top things your reviews say: deft writing, amazing characters, heart pounding, heart in my throat, roller coaster ride, nail biter, which is all amazing to do with a women's fiction book. This is a pretty unusual premise for a book which is women's fiction. It's about a character's emotional journey, right?
It is, yeah. It definitely has a strong element of suspense, and the emotional journey is key, but it's because of the situation the main character ends up in that she is forced into making choices that allow her to make decisions. I had a lot of fun with it and enjoyed writing all the action sequences. I love it when someone tells me that they lost sleep because they couldn't put the book down. That's great feedback.
It's the case for me. This thing, I went through your book so fast. It's a page turner. Let's take a quick peek at the cover and a review just so folks can see the book that we're talking about here.
Awesome.
It's WILDLAND. And I love this quote from Booklist. Taut suspense, a likable, sympathetic character with Kat, and fans of Cheryl Strayed's Wild or Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone won't want to put down this nail biter. What a great thing to have said about your book.
I know. I was so excited.
Tell us about the story. It's all set around a forest fire, but give us your pitch. Tell us a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, so certainly what started me down this path was interest in setting a story against the backdrop of a forest fire. And it is the story of a woman named Kat Jameson who retreats to the Blue Ridge Mountains because she's got a really tough decision. Her cancer that she thought was vanquished has returned. Her doctors are encouraging her to face more treatment, and she really doesn't see the point. She's lost her husband. She's just struggling to find a reason to keep fighting. And her intention is to spend a month completely by herself, but there are other rental cottages on the same road where she is staying, and she becomes involved in the people that live there. And eventually, with the addition of 2 rescue dogs that wander into the story at various moments, she and 2 children become trapped in a forest fire. And instead of contemplating her own death, she has to fight for her life. And the story is told in alternating viewpoints between Kat and Malcolm, who is the father of one of the children who is trapped in the fire.
And so where did the inspiration for this come from? Yeah, I love hearing, like, there's always that first spark and then it builds and builds and builds. So
absolutely.
In this case, a first spark, but like, what was that first spark for you?
So my youngest son lives in Boulder, and I was talking to him on a Sunday afternoon, and he mentioned very casually that he was standing on the balcony of his apartment watching a helicopter drop water on a forest fire that was close enough that he was able to actually see it. And so the mom part of my brain got a little bit freaked out, but the writer part of my brain started wondering what it would be like to set a story against that kind of backdrop. And that's what started it off.
Wow.
Before I came up with characters or anything else, I did a lot of reading about forest fires and how they move, how they start. And that certainly helped me start framing up a lot of the details that ended up in the book.
And one of the things that impressed me in this book is you do this thing that really skilled writers do where you extend time, right? So like this story does not take place over years. It takes place pretty much the core of it over like hours, right? Within a 24-hour period. Yeah. And you're like on the edge of your seat, minute by minute, feeling like you're going through this experience of running from a fire. And you've got the main character, Kat, and the 2 kids and the dogs. I mean, it's pretty amazing how you're able to stretch time out like that. Was that hard? Did it change a lot during editing?
It definitely was a conscious decision that I knew I needed to do that. I think that one of the big advantages writing has over visual media is that ability to play with time, to really skip 20 years easily, or to take 2 minutes and stretch it out over 15 pages. And I think that plus the ability to really get into a character's head are the two things that the written word can do better in most cases than film. And so I think it's good to take advantage of that, you know, to dive in and really spend some dwell time in those critical moments.
And did it change a lot from your first versions to the final book?
It did. So the original draft that I actually completed and actually got an agent with that draft was written in alternating viewpoints between Kat and Scott, who is the father of a young girl in the story. And the reason was that those were the characters I started off with. And so I, you know, wrote my way along. And then Malcolm and his adopted son, Nirav, walked into the story later in development. And I just kept going with my current narrator. Scott was the narrator. That's how I wrote it. And it was actually an editor at a publishing house that came back with feedback and said, you know, I think Malcolm is your right point of view character. I kind of panicked. My agent talked me off the ledge and convinced me to try a few chapters. Just, you know, don't commit, just give it a shot, see what you think. And it was immediately obvious that it was the right change. And so really 50% of the book was rewritten, not in terms of the events that were going on, but in terms of whose viewpoint you were in. So it was a significant rewrite, and there's no question it moved the book forward.
Wow. And you know, Nirav was actually my favorite character in this book. The young boy who's recently arrived in America, who's come from, what country did he come from again?
Comes from Pakistan.
And that actually he was my favorite character of the whole book.
I love Nirav, and the name Nirav means light. And that to me is just the perfect reflection of his character. Yeah, I get feedback from a lot of people that he was the favorite.
Yeah, so smart choice. So you got the person who cares deeply about Nirav narrating it. I thought was a nice way to go, right, as the point of view character.
Yeah.
So what about reading? Have you had a chance to read anything good recently?
Yeah, I read a lot, and I always hate for people to ask me to give recommendations because I have so many favorites. But I thought what I would do is recommend 2 books from North Carolina writers that came out last year that I really enjoyed. The first is called The Moonshiner's Daughter, and it's by Donna Everhart. Takes place in Western North Carolina in the 1960s, and it's a coming of age story where a young girl struggles between the expectations of her family to join the moonshining business and her desire to do the right thing. And Donna does a fantastic job of putting a lot of detail and a lot of empathy in her writing. And I've loved all of her books, but this is her most recent one. And the other book I wanted to call out is Big Lies in a Small Town by Diane Chamberlain. And this is a dual timeline story. In one timeline, we follow a white woman who goes in the 1930s to Edenton, North Carolina, which is the eastern part of the state. And she goes to this town as a stranger, tasked with painting a mural that documents the history of the town. And then in the contemporary timeline, we follow a young Black woman who is released from prison early on condition that she will renovate this mural by a specific deadline. And so it's a great story that focuses on race and art and secrets. And I would definitely put it in the page turner category. So both books take place in North Carolina. Both of them are written by North Carolina authors, and check them out if you haven't read them.
And you're also in North Carolina. I didn't ask you at the beginning.
Where
about state are you?
I'm in Raleigh, so that's the central part of the state. Yeah.
So any writing advice for people who are earlier in the journey? I mean, you've got this great first book. You've got a second one that I'm going to ask you about in a second, but any writing advice you would give people?
Yeah, I think the important thing to focus on, especially when you're starting out, is making sure that you are enjoying the journey. In writing, there is a limited number of things that you can control directly, and there is a huge number of things that are out of your control. You know, in a lot of jobs, the results that you get are directly impacted by how much you pour into it. And in writing, that's not always the case. And so while I would encourage people to be persistent, I would also encourage them to make sure that they're enjoying what they're doing, because if not, then you need to kind of find other ways to spend your time.
It's a great piece of advice because, yeah, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of bumps in the road, and if you enjoy it, it would be pretty miserable, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You got to keep laughing. That's the key.
So tell me about the new one. It's coming in September. Give us a sneak peek. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so it's called Over the Falls, and it will come out September 7th, or at least that's the current plan. Don't have a cover quite yet, but keep your eyes peeled for a cover reveal, hopefully in the not too distant future. It's a story of a woman searching for the sister she hates. Her quiet homestead life is upended when her nephew arrives on her doorstep unexpectedly. This is a nephew she's never met, and he informs her that his mother is missing. And so the story takes off from there. It's set in the mountains of Tennessee, in Memphis, Tennessee, and then much of the action occurs in the mountains of Colorado. So it's a fun book. It's a mixture of women's fiction and crime fiction. So I'm looking forward to the launch.
And let me just show a quick slide here if folks want to follow you so that they can see the cover when it comes out and keep in touch. rhodge.fiction on Instagram and RebeccaHodgeFiction.com. And also you have a newsletter, right? If folks want to sign up for your latest info.
I do indeed. Yeah, if you go to my website, the newsletter sign up is front and center.
Well, anything I haven't asked you before we wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered it. This has been awesome. And thank you so much for letting me join you.
No problem. I've wanted to have you on for a while. It's been months since I read this book and I loved it. And it's funny, the schedule's getting kind of backed up with authors that I want to talk to. So I'm so glad we were able to make this happen.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lainey.
Take care.
Bye.